I was rinsing my hands at the trough beside the barn when the ground shook behind me. There was no warning, no sound I could register in time, just the sudden thunder of hooves and a massive force slamming into my back. The impact hurled me forward and pinned me hard against the old wooden wall. In the same instant, two enormous horns crashed into the planks on either side of my head, burying themselves deep into the wood with a dull, splintering crack. I couldn't breathe. My chest was crushed against the boards, my feet barely touching the ground. The smell hit me next. Hot animal breath, dust, manure, old hay. My heart hammered so violently I thought it might burst straight through my ribs. Inches from my face was Buck's head, the broad white mark on his forehead so close I could feel the heat of his breath on my skin. Buck, my bull, the animal I had raised since he was a calf. For endless seconds he didn't move. His muscles were locked, his neck rigid, his horns still embedded in the wall. One twitch, one push, and my skull would have shattered between them. My arms burned as I tried to brace myself, splinters tearing into my skin, my left sleeve ripping as blood began to run down my elbow. Then just as suddenly Buck stepped back. The horns slid free from the wood. I dropped to the ground, my legs folding beneath me, shaking uncontrollably. I pressed my back against the wall, gasping, waiting for the charge to come again. But it didn't. Buck stood a few steps away, breathing hard. His massive sides rose and fell unevenly. He didn't paw the ground. He didn't lower his head. There was no rage in his posture now, only tension, and something else I couldn't place. When I dared to look up, what I saw made my stomach twist. His dark eyes weren't wild, they weren't aggressive, they were frantic. Not the look of an animal attacking, but of an animal trying to say something it couldn't. I forced myself to stand, never turning my back on him, inching sideways toward the house. Buck didn't follow. He stayed where he was, watching me, his ears flicking, his body taut like a drawn wire. Only when I reached the porch did my legs finally give out. I sat heavily on the steps, my hands shaking as I tried to understand how close I had come to dying. And then the fear shifted. Because my daughter came to mind. Emma was 7. Every afternoon she ran straight to the barn after school, laughing, feeding the chickens, sneaking apples to Buck like he was a giant pet. She called him her big teddy bear. He had always been gentle with her, always patient. But bulls don't get second chances. Not when they weigh over a ton. Not when a child's life is on the line. If Buck had truly turned dangerous, I couldn't keep him here. So I went inside and climbed the narrow steps to the bedroom closet. On the top shelf sat my father's old hunting rifle. I took it down, loaded it with hands that wouldn't stop trembling, and walked back out into the yard. Buck was still there. He turned his head as I approached, calm now, almost still. Our eyes met, and instead of fear or fury, I saw something like resignation, as if he understood exactly what was about to happen. I raised the rifle, set the stock against my shoulder, lined up the sight with the white mark on his forehead. My finger found the trigger. It wouldn't pull. My hand shook violently. My throat closed. Buck didn't flinch. He didn't step back. He just stood there, trusting me with a calm that cut deeper than any horn ever could. I lowered the gun. I couldn't shoot him, but I couldn't keep him either. That meant there was only one option left. I went back inside and picked up the phone. The phone felt heavier than it should have in my hand. I stood in the kitchen staring at it for a long moment, listening to my own breathing, trying to convince myself there was another solution. There wasn't. A bull that pins a man to a wall doesn't get explanations or second chances, no matter how long you've known him, no matter how gentle he's been before. I dialed the number I knew by heart. The livestock buyer answered on the third ring, his voice flat and businesslike. I told him I had a mature bull, purebred, strong, 8 years old, ready for immediate sale. I didn't mention the barn wall. I didn't mention how close I had come to dying. He named a price and said he could have a truck there within the hour. I looked at the clock. It was just after 1. Emma wouldn't be home until 4. That gave me time to finish everything before she ever knew Buck was gone. I hung up and went back outside. Buck hadn't moved. He stood in the same spot, his head lowered now, dust clinging to his coat. When I looped the rope over his neck, he didn't resist. He followed me calmly, almost carefully, as if he knew he had to behave. That made it worse. When the truck arrived, the driver lowered the ramp and nodded once. No questions, no comments, just another animal on another farm. Buck walked up the ramp without hesitation. He turned his head once, looking back toward the barn, then disappeared into the trailer. The envelope of cash felt dirty in my hand. When the truck pulled away, leaving a cloud of dust hanging in the air, the yard felt wrong. Too quiet, too empty. I stood there for a long time, staring at the marks his horns had left in the barn wall. At 4 o'clock, Emma came home. She ran straight for the barn like always, backpack bouncing, calling Buck's name. A minute later she came back, confused, asking where he was. I told her I had moved him to a distant pasture for a few days. She frowned but nodded, accepting it the way children sometimes do when they trust you completely. That night I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Buck's face inches from mine, his horns buried in the wood. But it wasn't the fear that kept me awake. It was the look in his eyes afterward, that frantic, pleading look I couldn't explain. Morning came hot and clear. I was pouring my second cup of coffee when I heard Emma scream, not a startled yelp, a full scream. The kind that freezes your blood. I dropped the mug, grabbed the first heavy tool I could reach and ran outside. Emma stood by the barn wall, pale, pointing at the ground with a shaking hand. "Dad," she cried, "there's a snake, a big one." I followed her finger. In the grass at the base of the wall lay a rattlesnake, large, thick-bodied. Its patterned scales caught the light, the rattle at the end of its tail still. It was dead, completely crushed, its body flattened in several places. I crouched down, my stomach tightening. All around the snake were deep hoof prints pressed into the soft dirt. I knew those prints. One front hoof had a distinct notch, chipped years ago on a rock near the fence line. Buck. The marks were fresh, less than a day old, right where I had been standing when he hit me, right where the snake must have been coiled in the grass, ready to strike. The truth hit me so hard, my legs went weak. Buck hadn't attacked me. He had slammed me into the wall to keep me from stepping forward, to keep me away from the snake hidden at my feet. He had crushed it with his hooves, risking my life, and his, because that was the only way he could warn me. The look in his eyes, the tension, the desperation. It all made sense now. I sent him away to die. Emma tugged at my sleeve. "Dad," she said softly, "you said Buck was in the far pasture, but I saw a truck yesterday. Where did they take him?" I couldn't answer. "I need to go," I finally said, my voice breaking. "Stay inside, I'll be back." I ran for my truck, slammed the door, and floored the accelerator. If I was right, then I had made the worst mistake of my life, and I might still have a chance to fix it. The road blurred as I pushed the truck harder than I ever had. I didn't think about tickets or engines or what would happen if something broke. I only thought about time. Every second felt like something being pulled away from me. I called the buyer while driving, jamming the phone between my shoulder and ear, my hands shaking on the wheel. The receptionist answered first. I shouted my name and told her not to touch the bull I'd sold the day before. She transferred me without a word. The manager came on, cold and irritated, and told me animals were processed on schedule and nothing could be stopped. "How long do I have?" I demanded. There was a pause, papers rustling. "Your bull is in the current intake. He'll be moved to the holding pen in about 20 minutes. 20 minutes meant I had 15. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat and floored it again. The speed climbed past anything reasonable. The engine rattled, the truck vibrating beneath me. A few miles outside town, traffic suddenly stopped. A line of cars stood motionless ahead, hazard lights blinking. I slammed the brakes and shouted in frustration. A fallen utility pole blocked the road completely. No way around it. Ditch on one side, trees on the other. Then I saw a narrow dirt track cutting off into a field. I didn't hesitate. I jerked the wheel and bounced onto it, the truck lurching violently. The road was rough, full of ruts and rocks. I nearly lost control on a bend, sliding sideways before catching it again. The track wound through scrub and trees, then spat me back onto the highway beyond the blockage. I was back at full speed when a siren lit up behind me. A police cruiser pulled in close, lights flashing. I slowed just enough to stop. The officer walked up, already speaking about reckless driving, but I cut him off. I told him everything. The bull, the snake, the slaughterhouse, the clock ticking down. He stared at me for a long second, weighing my words. Then he stepped back and waved his hand. "Go," he said. "If you crash, that's on you." I didn't thank him. I just drove. The slaughterhouse sat at the edge of town, a squat industrial building with high fences and wide gates. I didn't slow down. I drove straight through the open barrier, parked crooked near the main entrance, and ran. Inside, the air was thick with disinfectant and something metallic I didn't want to think about. I followed the sound of machinery, my boots slapping against the concrete. Then I saw it. A long metal corridor with bars on either side. Animals moving forward in single file. I counted. The first bull was almost at the gate. The second stood just behind him. The third was Buck. I knew him instantly. He stood with his head lowered, calm, resigned, as if he'd already accepted what was coming. My chest tightened so hard it hurt. "Stop!" I shouted, running to the fence. "That one's mine." The operator looked annoyed, ready to dismiss me, but then a man stepped out from an office overlooking the floor. Tall, broad, grey at the temples. McKenna himself. He listened as I begged. He listened as I explained. Then he smiled. The deal was done, he said. I had been paid. Buck was his now. I pulled the cash from my pocket and shoved it toward him, offering double. He didn't even glance at it. "Triple," he said. 6,000. Otherwise Buck was going through. I didn't have it. The loudspeaker crackled. "Third in line, prepare to move." Panic flooded my chest. I offered my truck, everything I owned. I begged. McKenna looked out the window at my truck, calculating. The money plus the vehicle came close. Not enough. The loudspeaker crackled again. Third entering the holding pen. I felt my knees buckle. Then McKenna raised a hand. He thought for a moment longer, then nodded slowly. He agreed. Cash and the truck. No tricks, no delays. I handed over the keys and signed whatever papers he shoved in front of me without reading them. My hands barely worked. McKenna turned to the operator. "Remove the third." The machinery clanged. A side gate slid open. An employee stepped into the corridor with a prod, but Buck didn't move. He just stood there, motionless. I climbed the fence before anyone could stop me. I walked straight up to him and placed my hand on his muzzle. "It's me," I said softly. "We're going home." Buck lifted his head. Our eyes met. Recognition bloomed there, slow and certain. He followed me. I led Buck out through the side gate, my hand still resting against his muzzle, as if letting go might undo everything. He walked slowly, obediently, his hooves echoing against the concrete. People stopped what they were doing to stare. A bull leaving the line never happened. Not like this. Outside, the sun hit us hard. I stood there for a moment, blinking, realizing something only then. I no longer had a truck. An employee came over with a thick rope and looped it around Buck's neck. He looked at me, then at the empty space where my vehicle should have been. "How are you getting him home?" he asked. I looked down the road. 5 kilometers, hot pavement, no plan. "We'll walk," I said. He stared like I'd lost my mind, then shrugged and opened the gate. We started down the road together, me in front, Buck behind me, the rope loose between us. He didn't pull, didn't resist, just followed, step by steady step, as if he knew exactly where we were going. At first the world felt unreal. Warehouses gave way to neighborhoods. Cars slowed, people pointed, phones came out. Some laughed, some shook their heads. I didn't care. With every step away from that building, the weight in my chest lifted. About halfway home, a pickup slowed beside us. An older farmer leaned out, recognized me, and asked if I needed a ride. I thanked him, but declined. He mentioned his own sick cow, a vet appointment he was late for. I told him to go. Buck and I would make it. And we did. When the familiar bend in the road finally appeared, my legs were burning, my shoulders aching, but I felt lighter than I had in years. Then I saw Emma. She stood at the gate, waiting. The moment she realized I wasn't alone, she screamed his name and ran. I barely had time to stop Buck before she wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his warm hide. Buck lowered his head and stood perfectly still, letting her cling to him. "You brought him back," she said, her voice shaking. "I knew you would." I knelt beside her and told her the truth. About the snake, about the wall, about how Buck hadn't attacked me at all. "He saved you?" she asked, eyes wide. "Yes," I said. "He saved my life." She thought about that for a long moment, then nodded seriously. "Then he's a hero." She paused, then frowned. "But where's the truck?" I smiled even as my eyes burned. "I traded it for Buck." She considered this carefully, then shrugged. "That's okay, Buck is more important than a truck." She was right. We walked back to the barn together. I untied the rope and opened Buck's gate. He went straight to the trough and drank deeply, then buried his face in the fresh hay Emma brought him. He let out a low, contented sound that I hadn't heard in a long time. I leaned against the fence and watched them. Buck had tried to warn me the only way he could. He had risked everything to protect me, and I had almost destroyed him because I didn't understand. Fixing that mistake cost me money, pride, and comfort, but it gave me something far greater: trust. Some debts can't be repaid with words, some lessons don't come gently, and sometimes the ones we think we own are the very ones saving our lives. That evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the farm in gold, I knew one thing with absolute certainty: I would never doubt him again.